Hi, and welcome to Sarah and Mike's Best Picture podcast. I'm Michael Cole, and this is episode number 10. This week we're going to be talking about the film The Ziegfeld Follies, which came out in 1936. The film starred William Powell, Myrna Loy, Louise Rainier, and Frank Morgan, and it was directed by Robert Z. Leonard. It won Academy Awards for Best Picture, Best Actress in a Leading Role. This was actually the first year that supporting acting categories were added, but this is leading role for Louise Rainier, and Best Dance Direction, and it was nominated for Best Director, Best Writing for Original Story, and Best Art Direction, and Best Film Editing. It is the first biopic ever to win Best Picture. Alright, so Sarah, what did you think of the movie?
I liked it. I did like this one pretty much right from the beginning.
That's good.
It might be my favorite so far.
That's interesting that you say that, because I had seen it, and so the parts that I remembered were the part with the strong man at the beginning, and I had pretty much that. That's all I can remember of it from 15 or more years ago. And I remember not liking it. And then when the DVD came and it said 3 hours, I was kind of dreading this movie, and we put it off for 3 nights now. And then it was really good.
Yeah.
So basically what the movie is about this man, is it Florenz? Is that how they pronounced it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Florenz Ziegfeld Jr. He was a showman in vaudeville and burlesque, and then eventually it seemed like he created Broadway as it is, or at least he was one of the first people to really get Broadway to where it was. He started with what were the Ziegfeld Follies, which were kind of shows, like a variety show kind of thing. Eventually he moved into plays with story, although they didn't show any of those, so I'm not sure if we would consider them like contemporary musicals as what we think of now, but they did show the Follies to a great extent, and I could have done with a little bit less of that. I think it was a little overkill on time. But I know they were massive and impressive, to show what he did. I think you would have
not been as interested in his life, or that was his life accomplishments.
Yeah.
Yeah. It would just be a story about a guy.
Yeah, that's true. They with those scenes in there, they showed the
level of over the top.
Yeah. That's a good point. But I just think that they could have done one scene, because I feel like they lasted 10 minutes, and personally, I didn't find them that entertaining. They were an impressive spectacle, but it was okay, get back to the story. What I found most interesting about the film was, so you get these Ziegfeld, and then there's this other character, Billings, who was played by, Frank Morgan? Yeah, Frank Morgan,
played the Wizard of Oz,
who was the wizard in the Wizard of Oz. And within 3 minutes of the movie starting, we were like, "Is that the wizard from the Wizard of Oz?" And then later on in the movie, there was the Scarecrow, Roy Bulger, something like that.
Sounds right.
He played himself, and he was the Scarecrow in the Wizard of Oz. So we were joking. And at one point, one of the women in the Follies looked like the Glinda the Good Witch, and we were joking that this was the audition tape for The Wizard of Oz, which comes out 2 years after. Mm-hmm. But Frank Morgan plays Billings, and Ziegfeld are, at the beginning of the movie, they're rivals, and they are friendly, but there is a strong competition, and they're kind of... they're half con man. Well, Ziegfeld is almost full con man, but Billings is less he's not as good at the con man game, but he's also doesn't spend his money like crazy. So like Ziegfeld keeps going broke and keeps needing to be lent money, and because Billings seems to be a pretty good sport about it, keeps lending him money, even though sometimes he lends him money and Ziegfeld uses that money to kind of like, not fully screw over Billings, but like, well, at the first one when he gives him $500 in London, and he goes, it's, he's broke, he's in London at this point, it's, you're riding a ship, you're not flying a plane, so he's kind of like stuck in London. He gives Ziegfeld $500, and Billings is going after this singer that he wants to be in his shows, and I don't remember her name, Anna something or other, but
the French woman,
yeah, played by Louise Rainier. Billings goes after her, or is going to go after her, and Ziegfeld realizes he's going after someone and uses the $500 to buy an enormous amount of flowers and to like sweep her away from Billings, which is kind of like, oh, thanks for lending me the money, here's the finger. But
and there's a little bit of that playfulness and back and forth, that they're kind of rivals but kind of friends, and they have fun with it.
Right. Well, that's the most cutthroat part. That was the most cutthroat moment that they showed. Mm-hmm. And then that ends up being Ziegfeld's first wife. And then they keep doing this. They keep going back and forth, and Billings says, I'm not going to give you money. I'm not going to help you get money for that. And then he always ends up giving the money, and it's just a really good. It to me, what I kept thinking of the whole time was Magneto and Professor X, like that we are rivals and friends, and the two are almost equal in our and so it's like playing chess against somebody that you respect and that you admire, but at the same time you still want to beat them. And I feel like they did that throughout the entire movie, except for the last scene. But so that was the most interesting relationship to me, was the two of them going back and forth over the course of about 35 years. One other aspect that I really found interesting was so after his first marriage basically falls apart, he starts seeing his second wife, and I thought that the way that his first and second wife handle each other to him, or in general, was kind of an interesting thing. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
Like the very first date, like the first official date they showed us with the second wife, she says something about, and what about Anna, his first wife, and he says something along the lines of, she was a magnificent woman, and basically like, I'm not, I have nothing bad to say about her, and the girlfriend who became the second wife said, I love you for saying that, which I thought was really different than I would have expected. Especially, like it would be one of those things that ultimately would have been easy for writers to play up a little more, animosity for drama's sake. So I kind of almost think that may actually be the case of how it played out. But then the next scene, they've gotten married. They've run away and eloped in Hoboken, which does not sound particularly romantic, but they elope there, and then his first wife sees the newspaper article and said something about, we saw her in the show. This is with her maid or whatever the woman was. We saw her in the show last week or 2 weeks ago, and she was magnificent. I can see why Flo, that was his nickname, Flo, is in love with her. And it basically is, you can tell that her heart is breaking because she was hoping things would work out with him. but that she like gets it and she doesn't, she isn't pissed off or anything else at this, other woman. And I thought that was really an interesting choice, especially being that, the second wife was alive and I believe at least to some extent participated in the making of this movie. She one of the IMDb things one of the IMDb trivia pieces was that the second wife had some kind of financial stake in this movie. So it's interesting that they didn't make the first wife seem like... I mean, the first wife seemed a little loopy and crazy, but she didn't seem like a jerk. They didn't do the thing that a lot of times they do in biopics, like where they make the first wife seem...
Yeah, I was wondering how she was gonna, like... how her story was gonna end, basically.
Yeah. I
kind of thought that maybe he might just, like, meet another woman and then just kind of, like... he would just pursue the new love, and I thought that was kind of the direction it was going to go.
After the first wife? Or after the second wife?
After the first wife, before you knew that there was going to even be a second wife. Like, that just... you had mentioned while we were watching that they had shown her at a previous part in the movie.
No, I misunderstood when I said that. I thought that...
Before that, though, I didn't know that there was going to be a second wife.
Yeah.
I thought for a minute that it might have been the little girl from the piano scene. I guess that was like his, like a...
I don't know if it was his father.
Like a distant family member or what?
No, I think okay, so there's this little girl at the beginning of the movie who is about 9 or 10 years old.
Maybe, if that.
Well, the actress was 9 or 10 years old. But the little girl is, I believe his father was more into classical, like musical performances, as opposed to, he considered he said something about his son, being involved in burlesque being kind of shameful, even though it like ended up changing by the end of the scene. But I think the father may have been teaching that little girl piano lessons. That's what I kind of took that as. And she goes on, she's 9 or 10 years old and says, me and your son are getting married and we're going to, and she doesn't know that he's in the room. And they have this very innocent, flirty scene that I thought was pretty, like a pretty cute scene.
Yeah.
And then you see at the
This is like, end, I think before he goes to New York.
Yeah. Yeah. And then at the end of his first marriage, you see this little girl come back as, an adult woman, and clearly like a beautiful adult woman. And she doesn't seem to be fully over the crush. And so I didn't know, because they hadn't really said her name that much, so I didn't know whether or not it was going to be his wife or what. At that point, he was still married and seemingly happily married, but I thought he was actually pretty good in that.
Yeah, he was like, go away.
Not just only because he was married, but I think that like he didn't, they play up the fact that he is a womanizer quite a bit in the, everyone talks about him being a womanizer, but he doesn't seem to show anything. And I wonder if that was them pulling back on scenes of him womanizing, because, whether it was because the new wife was involved in the process, or if it was because of the
that was his real wife,
the Hays Code. The actress was not, but the real second wife was involved. Billy, what did they say her name was? Billy something or other. She was involved. He died only about 5 years before the movie was made.
Oh, okay.
So the movie was probably...
And the real second wife.
Yeah, the real second wife was involved to some extent.
Okay. They don't show any of it. Like 0% of him really even like flirting or doing anything wrong with a woman that isn't his wife.
Right. Everything that happens that isn't really above board with someone that's not his wife is the other woman initiating and him basically stopping it
saying
almost
no.
immediately.
Yeah.
And you know, and that's why his first marriage ends. Is his wife sees him, sees a woman kissing him, and it looks like he's kissing her, but really he's just helped her off of a table because she was drunk, standing on a table, and she was going to fall. And then in the process of helping her down, she kisses him, and the wife walks in, and but even like every single time they showed something like that, he was as close to innocent as he could be in that situation.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I thought it was, I mean, this is like obvious basically, but he starts out like doing this, he's like doing the circus basically, and then after he has his little girl, he does another circus show. I liked that. And then this is just like a random stupid funny thing, but there is like almost identical one of the showgirls coming down the stairs in that wedding cake show that literally looks like Lady Gaga. Like there's like beads and sequins in front of her face, and there's even like 7 or 8 like backup dancer looking girls, and I'm like Lady Gaga, whoever styles her, like has seen this movie.
I was gonna say, it wouldn't surprise me because like Lady Gaga is known for being like over the top stage performance, and I'm sure
it almost fit like exactly. Like I'm it sure looks like there's a bunch of stuff covering her eyes. Like it looks like an outfit she would wear.
Well, Ziegfeld was apparently the guy who kind of created
started
that
look.
Well, not that look, but like he's the one who kind of made over the top set pieces
like
and stuff into these shows. And so I would be surprised if people who are into set design and things probably are aware and
true
of him.
I thought it was really well done with all the scenes of the shows. I mean, that must have taken a ton of work and people and planning. So I really liked all of that.
Yeah. I thought, so Fanny Brice is in the movie. If you're not familiar with Fanny Brice, Barbara Streisand played her in Funny Girl, and I want to say there was a sequel called Funny Lady, but I could be wrong on that. Barbara Streisand won an Oscar for playing her, but Fanny Brice plays herself in this, and it was funny because I have never seen Funny Girl, but I am, obviously aware of what Barbara Streisand looks like and has looked like, and she came out, and I'm like, oh, that they must have cast her solely on looks and the fact that she can sing, but like she looked like a Barbara Streisand character. Like it was funny, like to reverse engineer it that way. She was hilarious too. She was maybe one of the funniest individual characters. There was lots of funniness in the movie, but she was the funniest individual character, I thought.
Yeah. Also, this movie, quality-wise, like, extremely good. Sound, everything.
Well, there was a little bit of that sound in, like, the dialogue, but
very little. Yeah. There were still some title cards. There was, like, intermission, but that kind of, like, I guess was the play.
Yeah.
And, I mean, in any of these formats, when they had come out, it would have been multiple discs, VHS, whatever.
Yeah. Well, even if you watch like The Hateful Eight, there's an intermission card.
Yeah.
And that's
I think
3
that's
or 4
just
years
like
old.
a throwback.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's
no, but they do that on like long movies. I saw, anytime you see anything that is long enough that they're like the audience needs a break.
Right.
They'll do that.
Yeah.
So I didn't think of that as like, I don't think of that as title cards.
They had at the beginning too, and
overture. Yeah.
Because lead out music.
But part of that was because it was supposed to be like a Broadway show.
A play. And then I feel like they kind of threw in the stock market crash in 1929 kind of just as like a placeholder or bookmark to show you where they were in the years, and it kind of was like the New Year's Eve movie.
Yeah.
It felt like that a little bit when they did that. It was just kind of like it did serve a purpose.
Yeah.
And it kind of was like his demise, like, but at the same point,
I would imagine,
It was...
if he did go bankrupt and gain his money back as many times as he did,
Yeah.
or as they showed him do in the movie,
Yeah.
I can imagine that the stock market crash was a huge event because his, they show his friend, his Billings, and everybody else is probably losing their money,
Right.
and those are the people that would bail him out,
Right.
and he would make them back their money, but they would bail him out,
Right.
and so he had nobody to bail him out. He was also
Right.
older.
Yeah.
So I think it was I agree that it was thrown in there to kind of like let us know where we are, but I think at the same time it was the most fitting way of doing that.
Yeah. Agree.
I also thought so the final scene is he says it's been 2 years since my last big show. His last big shows that they showed at least were going on until the stock market crash. So you can gather that it's about 1931 or 32 at that point. And especially I think the crash was in September or October of 29. So it's almost 1930. And he died in 1932. But the last scene, which is supposed to be the last night of his life, he's sitting there with Billings. While he's sitting there, the doctors checked him because apparently he's been sick. They don't really say with what. I would guess pneumonia, it looked like, from the way they were treating it. And they, the doctor leaves and Billings comes, and the doorman who used to be, or the valet who used to be Billings' valet that Ziegfeld stole away from him, he helps him with his coat off, and he pulls his arm out, and the sleeve of the coat kind of comes with it, and you can see that it's in tatters. And he says something about my current valet doesn't take as good a care of me as you used to, and in that moment that he's broke. And Ziegfeld, they're in this big, he's dressed nicely otherwise, and Ziegfeld's in this big fancy hotel, but you can just tell that he's broke. And then he goes in, and Ziegfeld's more than willing to admit that he's broke all the time because it's happened so often, and he's made his way out of it so often, and he's big spender. And he says he's got this plan for a big show. He's going to need, I think he said, did you say 200,000, 250,000, which must have been huge money.
Yeah, 200,000,
especially right after the crash. Yeah. He says he's going to need that money, and Billings says it's no problem. And Billings, says, "Oh, I lost a couple thousand or whatever on the stock market, but I'm smarter than that." And he leaves. They have this great conversation where they both clearly, it's no longer lying to trick one another. It's at this point lying to save face and to keep each other happy. And I thought that was a great way to end it, because it kind of showed, like, the whole movie they're playing poker and they're bluffing and they're doing, they're giving, Billings gives away a lot accidentally, and it's back and forth with this poker like face kind of thing, and then at the end you see that they're doing it still, but the purpose has like completely taken, over the course from that very first part, there is like genuine animosity at the beginning where you can kind of tell that they like each other, but they don't really like each other. And at the end, they you can tell they're basically best friends. And I thought that they did a great job of weaving us from 90-10
right
animosity,
when they're like young guys, and
to 10-90 friendship, like, versus competitive,
right.
So I think that they did a wonderful job with that. Like I said before, I do think that relationship is the strongest point in the movie. The Louise Rainier, obviously, like we talked about, she won an Oscar. She was really good, but her performance was largely almost kind of, you think of a lot of times of performances as being relationship, back and forths, and I think a lot, to a good degree, her performance was a little more all about her and a little bit less back and forth. I'm probably not saying that correctly, but I don't mean that in like a she's being selfish way, but I mean that in more like a monologue versus dialogue kind of way. Interesting fact about her, she won the Oscar for this film. She won an Oscar the next year. She's the first actor or actress to win back-to-back Oscars.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well,
It's only been a few times when it's happened. I think it's less than 10. I think it's only been 2 men that have done back-to-backs. All right. Is there anything else to say about the Ziegfeld Follies? Oh, I didn't mention what it beat. So I should probably do that.
Trying to think. You can tell, I think one of the biggest scenes that really just tells about his character, not just at shows, but just in life, is the Christmas that they have. It's the only Christmas they show with his new wife, and his daughter, who's like probably 3 or 4, and they get her like this incredible dollhouse, and he gives the wife a fur coat, like a tiara, and he calls them the royal jewels. Like, he gives her this, really decadent bracelet and necklace, and the wife's like more concerned. She's like, we should take some of this back.
Right.
Like, I don't know if we can really keep all of this. And so, yeah, I thought that was like the only time where he seemed like he was such a good con artist and so smooth that like he always just kind of like worked it out and figured it out. And he'd have people that would come up to him and be like, when are you going to pay us back? And he'd be like, I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And I liked that running commentary too with his like assistant, I would guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the only time where you see like, oh no, this is teetering on like irresponsible.
Yeah. But it's the only time when anybody of any real importance confronts it too. Like, I mean,
that's true, and doesn't just kind of trust him. Like, yeah,
I mean, he's constantly got the almost monotonous facade. He's got the monotonous version of his money person or his accountant in the background. And you almost tune him out. And I'm sure he tunes him out because he's constantly saying, you don't have the money for this. This is the first time that anybody else other than that says anything to him. So anyway, sorry. The Great Ziegfeld beat Anthony Adverse, Dodsworth, Libeled Lady, Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, which actually Frank Capra won Best Director for, and Romeo and Juliet, San Francisco, The Story of Louis, is it Louis or Louis Pasteur, A Tale of Two Cities, and Three Smart Girls. So it beat a couple of, I don't know. The Mr. Deeds Goes to Town is the only one I know that I mean, obviously Romeo and Juliet, but I think Romeo and Juliet and Tale of Two Cities could, I don't know that I know those versions. But the main actor didn't get a nomination even for it, which I kind of thought was surprising. The guy, what was his name?
Yeah, I think he did a really good
William
job.
Powell, yeah. I thought he did a really good job. He sold not only the charm, but he showed kind of all sides of it pretty well. The makeup, like maybe they didn't have makeup nominations back then, probably didn't, but the aging makeup that they did on him, I believed him at the beginning, which was supposed to be, I
was thinking about that it could have been a little bit better looking in black and white than it would have been if it had been color.
True, that's very true.
Because they don't need to do much to his hair to keep it looking like it's progressively getting more gray.
Yeah,
which I thought
but they also did a lot with his eye. Like they did,
they totally did, and it was like very light. Like it wasn't like overly done.
Right. one thing I did want to mention that I just remembered was, so while we were watching the movie, I was kind of looking up the man himself that the movie's based on, Ziegfeld, and the timeline, and I know this is common with biopics, but like the timeline, it seems very off. So like they've got Fanny Brice playing herself, but in that point in the movie, he's still married to his first wife, and his first wife and him got divorced in 1913, and Fanny Brice would have probably been like 15 years old, but she in that scene is clearly like 40 or whatever. There's just lots of spots where I'm like, oh, this timeline probably doesn't add up, and they're just doing it to tell the story, which doesn't bother me. If I was watching this movie not for this podcast and not looking it up while I was watching it, I think that there's a decent chance that I would, if I had watched it then read that afterwards, it would have bothered me less than I think watching it while reading about it, which is something that I tend to do. So like that's the way I watch, but like it's an obnoxious way to watch, and I'm aware of that. But I just thought that was a little interesting that like the timeline's kind of all over the place, especially when you're considering it. It starts he marries his first wife in 1897, and the movie starts before he's met his first wife, and then it ends in 1932. And when I think they showed him age well, but like that's a huge gap of time to be, playing around with things like, especially when you have Fanny Brice playing herself, but then you have someone else playing Will Rogers because Will Rogers had died a year before. It was just an interesting mix. I guess that was part of it for me was you have a mixture of people playing themselves, and same thing with like Roy Bulger played himself, and he had to be born in, I didn't look it up, but based on how old he looks like maybe he's 25 years old maximum in this movie, and he's playing himself pre-1914. Like those kind of things, especially because they're playing themselves, and like for him I was aware, like the only, we didn't look that up and find out it was him. I said, I think that's the Scarecrow, and then I looked it up and was like, oh yeah, not only is he the Scarecrow, he's playing himself, which when you know that, and you're like, oh, like if I played me at this age in 1990, you'd be like, well, this doesn't make much sense. So like that's like a super nitpicky, Mike's a little crazy.
But like, was he really in his stuff?
He may have been. He may have done.
Like, I didn't know if like some of it was just like added cameos, like for like interest for the people that like.
Yeah, that's
also
totally
knew who he was.
Yeah. That's totally possible, but it's totally possible. But I don't think that if you're gonna do that, just do it at the end of his life. Like why would you? Or do it with somebody who's older who looks like they could pull it off. Like that guy was arguably playing. It was in the year that he would have been like between 5 and 10 years old, and he's 25 in the scene at I don't know. It was distracting to me. But other than that, I thought it was really good. I was surprised at how good I thought it was. I don't have much else to say, do you?
No. I mean, definitely some of the scenes of the shows, I thought it was like really impressive. Yeah, the scale of the performance of the stage performances within the movie was massive and impressive, and like I said, it won Best Dancing Direction, and I think that for an Oscar that I've never heard of before, it deserved it. Yeah, and like to think about it, like. There's no, like, touching up stuff. There's no, this was all, like, real. Like, 100 people climbed up onto that thing.
And they're continuous shots.
Right. Continuous shots, dancing, the whole thing. Yeah. Like...
It's not like nowadays when you can, like, use a technical trick to make it look like one shot. Like, those performances were one shot.
Yeah.
Even if they did 5 takes or whatever.
Right.
That was one shot.
And even like the dancing was just, I think, like impressive and like well done. It was like for a movie though.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like, yes, it was about that, but like that wasn't its sole purpose. Like it wasn't like we were watching Black Swan, where Black Swan was a ballet movie. Like, yes, this was a very important piece to this movie, but like I just was very overwhelmed by the quality.
Yeah. All right. I think that's it. So next week, the next movie that is in chronological order is The Life of Emile Zola. According to Netflix, the DVD is a very long wait. So I'm not sure if we'll be getting that next or if it will skip. If we don't get that next, I'm going to see if it's on iTunes. Hopefully we don't have to come back to it. Hopefully we don't have to come back to it. Hopefully we can continue in order. We will try to do that. If it's not that movie, though, it would be You Can't Take It With You, which is another Frank Capra movie. I think that's the end of Frank Capra as far as winners. And then the real big one, the real big long movie that's going to be kind of a chore, but also probably going to make one of our most interesting episodes for a little while, and that is Gone with the Wind, and then we're done with the 30s. So hopefully Life of Emile Zola next week. We will be working to try to get that taken care of. As always, please, like and subscribe. If you're listening on iTunes, if you could write us a review, that would be great. If you are interested in checking out, we have a short film up on chocolatediamondmedia.com, and we're going to have another one in about 3 or 4 days. Our goal is 1 a month. And I'm continuing to write over at michaelchristophercole.com, as well as at World's Best Media, which you can find at best-media-world.com. If you want to email us any comments or anything that you want us to include in the show, please do so at mikediamond82984@gmail.com. Thanks, and we will see you next week.